We're back at Woodcraft in Hurst, Texas. This is Mr. Steve Julian. Thank you for having me back.
Man, pleasure.
I appreciate it. And Mr. Steve is a professional instructor here. We're going to give you a mini master class on beginner woodworking, kind of the do's and don'ts and what to do on each machine in your shop.
I teach the Woodworking 101 class here at Woodcraft in Hurst. So I show them my 3-step process to get wood ready for a project. So it's the planer, table saw, and the joiner that work in conjunction with one another to properly process your wood to get it ready for a project. So the first step, we come over here to the joiner, we establish one straight edge. So let me go over some tips on the joiner. First one is obviously the machine has to be tuned up precisely. The bed has to be at a perfect 90-degree angle to the fence to establish a good edge. It's just a simple matter of taking your square, using it here, making sure, checking this measurement, checking that one over there, making sure they're 90 degrees to one another. The next thing is to always remember, do not take too much off in one pass. The way I do it in my shop, my joiner is never set below 1/16 of an inch per pass. You really don't need to go any more. It may take a couple of passes to establish that, but if you'll just do 1/16 at a time, it works out fine.
Is that a common mistake you see beginners make?
Trying to take too much wood off. You want to take small bites. You never want to try to hog off too much material in one pass because it's just not good. The quality of your cut is going to go downhill. Things just don't work out for you. Put more stress on the bit, the collet, the router, the cutters in the machines, stuff like that. So it's really not advisable to take much more than that. So yes, you may have to make more than one pass to get it done, but that's what woodwork is all about, patience. So if you have to make 2 or 3 passes, well, so be it. We move from the joiner over to the table saw, which is the next step in the 3-step process.
Okay.
Since the fence on the table saw is straight, now our board edge is straight. They can mate up appropriately. So the next thing we need to do is to get the boards ripped to their final dimension. All we're doing right now is putting that freshly established straight edge against it, setting the fence to the appropriate width that we need to have, making sure that we're using the correct blade. In this scenario, when we're ripping a board, we want to use a blade, in this case, a 10-inch 24 tooth. That's what we use in the class. The reason we use this one is because it's designed to make rip cuts, which means we're cutting with the grain. Has larger gullets, has fewer teeth.
When you say the gullet, you're talking
I'm talking about the space
between
the space in between the teeth. Yes, the gullet where I have my finger right here. So we have these large gullets that can excavate material out of the way faster. So we can use a moderate push rate because this thing will get the job done because the gullets are so big. So we install the ripping blade in the table saw and then set the dimension that we need and go ahead and rip the boards to their final width. From that point, we're going to move back to the joiner to do another step. After the table saw, we come back and now we need to run the straight edge we just established against the fence, and we're going to be pushing the board in this way. You never want to use your hands as push sticks.
Right.
You always want to use some sort of safety device. Speaking of the push pads, these push pads that are commercially available are good, but you can make them better.
Power tip.
What I do is drill 4 holes in each corner of the push pad, and then I'll take about a 1/2 inch long screw and I'll screw through this so that the tips protrude from the bottom.
Gives it like cleats.
Like cleats. Now there's no way that board is going to slip or get away from it because it's locked in with these 4 sharp tips.
Right.
So typically these are okay, but they get clogged up with sawdust. If the board is flat, it's probably not going to be a problem. But if you're working with rough sawn material that has not been surfaced or anything, well, these can't get as good a grip as the screws will get. They'll never slip. So using them that way.
And the dimples that you're going to put in there are going to be planed off in the next step.
They're minor. You can hardly see those things, okay? So we never want to use our hands as pushers. You never know what the board may do. It may split, it may kick back on you, or some other undesirable result that you may get. So you never want to use these as push sticks. You always want to make sure you have a push pad, and if the boards are long enough, use two. We're always applying pressure downward and forward. We're not going to just stand here. We're going to walk the board through until the cut is complete all the way across. So you're just going to kind of walk it through until the cut is finished.
Now you've got commercial equipment. A lot of us using benchtop jointers, benchtop planers. All this applies to the same equipment.
It all applies, right, because with the joiner and the planer, there are different levels of machines that may fit your budget better.
Right.
If you don't have the space or the budget, which are the two things that stand in most woodworkers' way, is space and budget. Okay, so yes, you can easily use the benchtop versions, but all the principles that I've talked about so far apply to whatever machine it is.
Right.
Whether it be the small joiner, the big one, or whatever, okay? They're all the same. Well, we have the board flat. We have one 90-degree edge as a referenced edge, okay? So we've got two of those things done already. The next step after that would be going to the planer. So this is the third step in the three-step process, going to the planer. We use this in class on our last step. And the last step is basically, as far as processing the wood goes, is to get it down to the thickness that we need. The planer is relying on a flat face. The difference between these two machines is that the joiner has the cutter heads on the bottom. The planer has the cutter heads on the top. The planer is using this base as a reference. This is a flat base. We have a flat piece of wood, and we just adjust the planer accordingly. Now for this particular planer, again, we're going back to taking light bites. The way I do this on all my planers is I'm going to lower this until the wood will not pass through. This little black steel device right here is telling me that I'm trying to remove too much material, because I can circumvent this. I can move over here, and now the wood will pass through, okay? But it won't pass through this way. So we don't want to do this, because that's a recipe for getting your wood really messed up. So if it won't go through, raise the planer, the handle, until it does go through. Once you can get it by this safety device right here, you're good to go. Then it's just a simple matter of, from that point, running the boards through. This will make both faces of the board parallel to one another. The joiner cannot do that. It can get this other surface flat,
right,
but they won't be parallel.
That's key.
That's key. That is the reason for number 3 step, to run it through the planer to get the boards parallel. Okay, so now we have basically an S4S board. After we're done this, we have it's surfaced on all sides. We've established a good edge. We ripped it on the table saw to get this edge parallel to this edge. So we've got a nice straight board. The only thing right now that we really haven't addressed is the edge, okay? So we need to make sure that the edges of the board, in this case, obviously this edge is not square, so we go to the miter saw to cut these edges 90 degrees to this edge. Okay, on the miter saw I've made a couple of enhancements, and maybe you can think about doing the same thing to your saw. First one is the zero clearance, what I call the zero clearance throat plate or insert. Okay, so I've taken the factory insert out of this saw and put this in. So this tape from Fast Cap comes on rolls. It's peel and stick. put it down there. Now it's a blank, it doesn't have any cut in it. Once you make your first cut, that will establish this zero clearance line down here, which prevents you from, when you're taking off a little piece of material, it'll prevent that piece of material from falling down inside the trough. Okay, so that was the first upgrade. Obviously, the second upgrade I made is a nicer blade. Usually, miter saws come with a 60-tooth blade. I've put an 80-tooth blade. The more teeth, the finer the cut. Also, I added this sacrificial fence back here, this 1/4-inch piece of plywood. It's basically does the same thing as the zero clearance does. It prevents small pieces of wood from being thrown back by the motion of the saw this way. So that prevents that. So if you're cutting off a little strip or something, it's just going to lay right there. It's not going to do anything. It's just going to lay it there after it's been cut. So the way we establish this square edge, and I can tell on this board that this is a rough factory edge because I can still see saw marks. So what we want to do, we want to cut this off and not use it. So we want to make this our reference edge. So we will put the board down here. We will straddle the zero clearance portion of this plate and we will make the cut. Then after that's been established, we know this edge is square, this edge is parallel to that, so we end up with a 90-degree edge. Once we cut that off, then we will flip the board around. And now we're going to be using this squared up edge as the reference edge to cut the rest of our pieces to the same size.
The common theme that I'm getting is we're always, for one, we establish the reference edge.
Yes.
And then from there you start referencing that edge to the next.
Got to
so you're
start
always getting
right.
two parallel sides, all 6 planes of it.
That's right. We have to get these boards flat, square, straight. Because if you don't, then your project is going to suffer.
Yeah.
Okay. And all this is about calibration, making sure your table saw is calibrated right, making sure the miter saw is calibrated right, that it's in fact cutting a good 90-degree corner. It's just a matter of checking these machines to make sure they're up to snuff and
right.
they're doing the correct thing. So once we have that done, we got a good reference edge to work off of. Now we can start cutting our pieces, and we're confident as we move along that everything is where we need to have it. And then we start on the project. So that is basically a general overview of the 3-step process that I use to get boards ready for woodworking.
Yeah.
Ready for a project.
That's awesome. Thanks, sir. Appreciate that.
Yes, sir. You bet.
This was just part 1 of the mini masterclass for beginner woodworkers. Part 2 is coming soon. Be sure to subscribe, bell icon, so you don't miss that. Thank you so much to Mr. Steve as well as Woodcraft for allowing us to do that video. If you missed the first time I ever visited Woodcraft, you got to watch that video right there. Click in the box, get you the big old virtual fist pump. Also, the first time I ever went to a hardwood store, right there.